Welcome to the worldwide headquarters and studios of All Duke Sports Talk, where all Duquesne sports fans can unabashedly and fully indulge in everything Duquesne University sports. So, without further ado, let's get to it. And let's go Dukes!
Hey, welcome back, Dukes Nation, for the what amounts to be, unfortunately, season wrap-up show for Duquesne men's basketball, but we will also cover all Duquesne sports like we normally do. It is All Duke Sports Talk, your favorite YouTube show slash podcast. I am Bob Healy III, joined, as always, by Rudy Longarini and Nick Frost. And this week, our guest is another student reporter. He is the sports editor of the Duquesne Duke. He is none other than Megadeth fan and New York Mets sufferer Mike O'Grady. Mike, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Great to be here, Bob. Thank you.
So Mike is a sports information and media student at Duquesne. Again, he's sports editor. So Spencer Thomas, the editor-in-chief we had on a prior episode, is Mike's boss with that publication. Mike, you wrote an article that you can get on, it's now duquesneduke.org, right?
Yes.
About the Duquesne Dukes' long coverage of Duquesne men's basketball with that 100th anniversary edition. Can you talk to us about that article? I did read it. Not everyone has. I want to point them to the website to get it. But you looked at the way the reporter covered New York City back then and gave it a name that most people aren't familiar with, right?
So the story with that was when the Dukes won the NIT in 55, I think it was. The reporter said something like, well, everybody on Peter Stuyvesant's island was amazed. I'm just like, Peter Stuyvesant? How did they know that? Because Peter Stuyvesant is he was like a very famous Dutch governor of New York when it was still New Amsterdam back in the 1600s. So, I mean, you're talking 1955, you don't have the internet or anything yet. And this person that goes to Duquesne, a Catholic school in Western Pennsylvania, knew that Peter Stuyvesant governed New York in the 1600s. So that was very funny to me. I like that.
Yeah, it's a cool article, talking about basically the long running practice of covering as many Duquesne Dukes games as you can. And that 55 NIT game, which is the crowning achievement of Duquesne basketball to this point, that was obviously covered. Mike, you covered a number of men's games this year in person, but I don't think you got out to the A10 tournament. But I'm certain you watched it. We
Yeah.
had a champion crowned today. We are on St. Patrick's Day Eve, Sunday, March 16th, hence the hat. VCU, the number one ranked team heading into the tournament, did win against number two George Mason, a team that Duquesne had beaten Mike less than a month ago, and probably their best performance this year, Duquesne over George Mason. Were you surprised at all that VCU ended up winning the whole thing? I think you had saw them in person.
Not at all. VCU was actually my preseason pick to win it all.
Mhm.
So I wasn't really what's the word? I wasn't really bought into the Mason hype all year. I thought VCU was overall a more solid team. I mean, I always think Dayton too could always be dangerous. You never want to count out Dayton, but I think overall, I mean, no, not surprising.
So, Nick, Rudy, obviously Duquesne men's basketball, not what we had hoped for when we spoke in our most recent episode. We talked about how Duquesne, if it plays its game, can beat anybody. We also mentioned how Duquesne can lose to anybody, it seems, right? And Duquesne did, unfortunately, what it had done a bunch this year, didn't they, Nick, the Dukes? Losers 64 to 59 against number eight St. Bonaventure. The Dukes, the nine seed. That game back on Thursday, March 13th. And Nick, that was despite holding a 13-point second half lead. Something the Dukes just couldn't do this season was hold on to leads.
Yeah, and I mean the big run in this one was caused by a lot of turnovers. I mean, Council literally took the ball from our guards a few times, and then one of their other guards had a few more steals in that process. And then the missed free throws by Trey Dinkins, who was our best free throw shooter all year, but that was that really rang true to the team's problems all year this year. Free throws sunk us consistently, and while we ended up losing by a lot more, that first missed free throw really felt like, okay, we're letting them back into this at this point.
Yeah, missing the front end of one and ones that never helps. Duquesne losers 64 to 59, despite getting three scores in double figures. compared to just 2 for St. Bonaventure. But the Dukes turned the ball over 18 times. 11 of those were steals. I think Jones might be the other guard you were thinking of with he had 3 steals compared to Council's 4. Rudy, it's very frustrating as a Duquesne fan, knowing where the team was at the beginning of the season, starting out 0-6, and then coming all the way back at one point, flirting with a winning record, and then ending up the way that the Dukes did and going out one and done here in the A10 tournament. Your just immediate takeaways, Rudy, from, I guess, not just the tournament, but the whole season.
You go to Nick all the time first because he's gonna look at the sunshine, the optimistic, the yin, dude. What was the first thing that I texted you guys after during the game? Freaking free throws, dude. So, man, we had our most reliable free throw shooter at the line, and he couldn't can 4. Of the 4, he had 4 shots. He missed 3. So I mean, I'm speechless. How we could lose a 13-point lead, kind of like 5 minutes into the second half. It's a microcosm of the season. As your previous guest, that is your fellow worker at Duquesne Duke says, the Dukes are what they are. Okay, they're not going to win a game at the free throw line, and we got proved right. I don't know what else to say.
Well, Mike, the Dukes led 48-35 with 12 minutes and 34 seconds to go after a Max Edwards 3-pointer. And then it basically went to hell from there steadily. Edwards, by the way, finished 7 of 12, including 3 for 7 from 3, had a team high, tied for a game high with 18 points. Also had 6 rebounds.
Find him, however, we couldn't find those guys when it mattered the most. Where were those guys? Why weren't we getting the ball to Maximus Edwards, Bronski, who hit the free throws, the 3-pointers at the beginning of the game? He totally got lost in the last 15 minutes.
Well, I want to get Mike's opinion on this. He's probably watched more games and was closer to it than the rest of us, especially given his vantage point and covering the team. Mike, I'm sure you watched the game, although we had class that day. I know I had it on in my classroom trying to do both for my students. But from what you saw, I guess, Mike, not just in this game but throughout the season, does the ending surprise you, or is there anything that Duquesne did differently than they hadn't done all year, or is this just like Spencer was saying, this is just who they are?
No, like you said, it was completely on brand for them. Their whole thing this year was that, Trey Dinkins got all the points, but they never really had a true scorer anywhere, and that they didn't replace Clark or Grant with anybody who could score at that level. I think what the Dukes need is somebody like Giannis. Now, I'm not saying they need Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like, you're not getting Giannis anywhere in college, but
he wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, he wouldn't hurt, but just somebody with that kind of play style, a big that can get to the rim easily. I get Dambrot and Joyce like their shooters. Edwards was really good this year. I like what Crawford did toward the end of the season, but you just saw what happened. That's what happens when stuff doesn't go in, and it's just, yeah. So again, it wasn't surprising to see them lose like that. It happened continually this year. Going back to November even, I think like the Milwaukee game was kind of like that too. And so, it's just, but I think they really need to bring in the kind of power forward next year that they haven't had for a couple of years.
We need somebody in the paint. Last year, who graduated and got hurt in the playoffs? Before the playoffs.
Trey Williams.
Yeah, Williams.
All-time great Duke.
That guy, we needed somebody like him, okay, to go into the paint and bang. And now Wilborn is good and he's developing, but he is in in the infinite stages of being a power forward and getting to the rim. Dambrot was an inside out guy. Okay, do you know what I mean by that?
Sure.
He was that he was going to get the ball to the power inside, and then he's going to allow those guys to make the decision whether they were going to pass it to the outside guards or cutters. Okay, and Drew maybe doesn't believe in that. Okay, but that's what we needed. And so when that game got critical, uh, uh, you know, we could have dumped it into a big guy and allowed him to decide. Yeah, Dinkins is open. Oh no, Maximus Edwards is open.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, the Dukes have a lot of depth, but they don't have like a 7-footer. There's not a skyscraper on the roster that would make a giant difference. So the nice thing is Eli Wilborn will be only a junior next year, and I'm a huge fan of Eli, what I saw out of him toward the end of the year. Dave Dixon will be back as a senior, and they're going to have some bigs returning, and then we see what the transfer portal looks like. Nick, is it as simple as getting a big to supplement the shooters, or is it more, hey, get the ball in someone like like a Giannis type, almost like Netjis could be for us, not comparing
Right.
the two, of course,
That
but
just got to develop that. He just doesn't have the power moves.
mm,
To get to bang. Wilborn has has the size, okay, but he doesn't have the moves quite above. He's got more. He's more of a post player, more of a center type. But Nexus is he's got a how you back your way into with your butt, you know uh but anyway,
yeah, sure,
you
like a
got
true
it.
big, right? Of course.
So
And
I think that Jayshawn Corbett was kind of what the team was probably
right,
picturing as the
exactly.
guy that was going to be able to make his own shot, and he did a little bit in the non-conference, but then that faded away as we
Yeah.
got conference play. So that did hurt. Now, I don't think he necessarily gelled with the role within the team either. So we do need to work on that. Netjes could develop into that stretch four that
Right.
works on his driving ability and expanding everything. But he's doing a lot already. So that we'd be asking a ton from him to take another leap on that end and keep up the defense that he's shown. Uh, as far as Coach Joyce, I did want to mention that I think every time he called a timeout and drew up a play, those were the highlights. The Max Edwards three off of the timeout with about 5 minutes to go or something along those lines, time wise. That felt like, oh, we might actually be able to hold on after that huge momentum shift. It faded away again. I am optimistic that Max Edwards might stick around based off the post-game presser. Drew showed why he was the clear guy to continue on the Dambrot legacy. And Dambrot said that he wanted to be inside out. And he did bring in bigger guys like Mike Hughes and Marcus Weathers, who was probably the four that you were thinking of, Rudy.
Right.
But he still loved the guards who could shoot. And that's the modern style of basketball today, where you need to have guards that can stretch the floor. It opens up space for people to attack the rim in theory. I think we need a guard who just can drive and attack the rim better. I think that's the biggest thing we were missing. Jimmy and Day Day both were able to drive to the basket regularly. We don't really have that now. Trey
particularly
and
Jimmy.
Kareem both kind of get blocked a little more easily whenever they drive to the basket.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably the biggest thing we were missing. We do have two freshman guards coming in that are known to be able to drive to the basket in high school. I don't know whether that's going to continue on when they're freshmen with us. So that's the biggest concern, I think, is actually we need a guard who can consistently drive to the basket and cause people to have to crash and find openings. I think that's the biggest thing we were missing this year, looking back on it.
Well, guys, next year, here's who I see anyway as the returners, and I'm talking about key returners. Now that's again with transfer portal and things you don't know, but Jake DeMichael will come back as a redshirt sophomore. He ended up taking a medical, obviously. And then you still have Eli Wilborn. He's coming back. He's a forward, not a guard like Jake, but Eli will be a junior. You have Ronski will be a senior. Max Edwards, redshirt senior. Netjes will be a junior. We didn't see Alex Williams this year, a transfer from Furman. He would have redshirted as well, so he might be back. Chabi Bare will be a senior. Kareem a senior. Dave Dixon a senior. Cam Crawford a redshirt senior. So and Mike, if I'm not mistaken, is it Jenkins who may have another year of eligibility, or am I thinking of Corbett? That's up in the air, right?
You're asking the wrong guy because I never know with college these days. I never know who's coming, who's graduating, who's not. I mean,
so it was mentioned in the post-game presser. Dinkins is the one that potentially could come back.
okay.
That's what it is, because he played 2 years of junior, and now one of those doesn't count based on a recent ruling. So he could actually come back and play at Duquesne. I mean, look at the amount of guys you're bringing back, and almost all of them, right, have experience as a championship member of the team. So I want to go around and ask you guys maybe whom your starting five would be, and you can elaborate as much as you can or want to on that, because that's where the attention turns to. Now, we don't know entirely what next year's roster is going to look like, but let's assume players with eligibility left are returning, okay? And let's also assume that anybody who's coming as a true freshman is not going to start right away. And I just want to kind of go around looking at the roster, and I'll start with Rudy. Who's your starting five, really, if you had to look at it right now here on March 16th?
Well, I wasn't paying attention too much of your graduates and stuff like that, but obviously Nexus is number one on the list there. Wilborn.
Now, do you think this Eli your five? Is he your center?
No, we want him as the center, because he's got that wide body. I mean, he could develop, but he hasn't shown that he's got a jump shot or any kind of thing at mid-range shot. He's strictly a center.
He seems like a true banger. He's listed as a forward, but they don't have anybody listed as a center. It's kind of like passe these days. To have a true center, it's like having a fullback in football.
Right. No,
like this is off topic, but did you guys see Bonna's?
What's that, Mike?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you guys look at Bonna's roster? Because Bonna has like 2 true forwards. That's it. It was like all guards, and then like I don't know, 3 centers and 2 forwards. It was weird because like they had a 6'7" guard. It's like
that's Magic Johnson.
But I mean, they beat us. So.
Yeah. That's interesting as heck. Rudy, so if Eli's your 5, I would assume is it your 3
Maximus Edwards?
So Max,
I try to start him next year if he's willing to come back, right?
Yeah, I would start him too if he's willing to come back. I think that Drew Joy showed a lot of faith in him. And I think he'll reward him. And I think there's leaders on this team like Netjes and Dixon and Rozier that will keep the team together, honestly.
Right. And I don't know about, Rozier starting or not. I think he's gonna he's gonna be a change of pace or steadying influence coming off the bench next year.
So let's assume
we just gotta find a guard. In the protocol.
A point guard, a true point guard.
Yes, a point guard in the protocol, but because I don't think a freshman point guard is going to hack it. It's just too much, unless they're super high prospects, and we don't. I mean,
well, Nick, tell us about these 2 guards that are coming in.
Yeah, so the big name get was Dom Akins. I think he's out of either Western Ohio or Eastern Michigan. He's been a commit of ours for a while. I think he's 6'2" or 6'3" height wise, so he's not too small. He's a bit of a slasher, but does again, this is all like highlight tape stuff, but he does seem to have a jump shot. My big question, he seems a little on the skinnier side. Not that, I mean, there's not many guards that are like thick. But as a freshman,
nobody built like Jimmy Clark.
Yeah,
that guy was built, man. You ever seen that guy? Tree trunk.
Yeah. And but by the time when you're a senior and you go from being a boy to a man, that happens. These guys, these male athletes, they grow till they're 22, so like he might, yeah, as a true freshman, it is hard to get in there and bang around with the frame that Nick's talking about.
Yeah, and we are going to have a really experienced roster potentially coming back, so I don't know. We'll see if he earns his spot. Like Drew said, that's how he had with Trey Dinkins, is that he needed to earn the starting spot this year, and that's why he didn't start right away. So maybe Akins can develop into a starter as the season goes on. I have a hard time believing that he'll be a starter right off the bat. My 5 would be similar.
Wait, hey Nick, did you mention both names? I'm sorry.
No, I don't know the other guard off the top of my head. I know he's another slasher sort of guard, but I don't remember what his name is.
Oh, no problem. Give us your 5.
Yeah, so Netchis is definitely a 4. Crawford would be one of the wings. DeMichael would be a starter. I'd probably have him at the point. I know I talked about that before he got hurt, maybe experimenting him at point, just having the ball flow through him. And then if Max comes back, I do think he'd be able to be rewarded. He might be better as a 6th man like he was this year, but I'd really like to see him, DeMichael, and Crawford on the floor at the same time. That's a lot of offense and defensive capabilities there. And then at center, I mean, as a starter, it'll probably be Wilborn. In the clutch minutes, it'll be dependent on what we need, whether we need David Dixon in there to get some key blocks. Or, I mean, Alex Williams, I'd like to see what he does. I never really know how guys play until I see him in the Dukes uniforms. So he could be I think he's a forward/center on the roster. I could be wrong about that.
He's 6'5". But he's 235 pounds.
Yeah, he's a bigger guy, but that still seems like a 4 typically. But yeah. I mean, Charles Barkley, Zion, they were never center size, and they basically play a 5. So I don't know. We'll see how he fits in. But I think the core 3 or 4 guys are pretty set, and then it's just a matter of which center fits the needs that we have at that point.
So, Mike, 2 questions. How did the loss of Jake DeMichael for the season affect the Dukes? And then what would your 5 be?
I think Jake going down was huge, especially since I don't think they had a plan for his injury either, because it was just all of a sudden he was out, and then we thought he was coming back, and he didn't. So, I mean, they were missing his shooting all year at that 3 spot. I think it was just something that they didn't plan for. And I mean, Corbett kind of filled that role some nights, but Corbett was kind of like a square peg in a circle hole, kind of, and he was fine. I mean, I was excited when Corbett came to us, but he didn't really work out as well as I thought he would have. But yeah, they definitely missed Jake. And I think he absolutely should start next year if he's healthy at the 2. I would put Crawford at the 1. I think Crawford gets to nod over Dinkins. And then 3, you either got to go Hronsky or Netchis. I would lean Hronsky because, I mean, it depends on the kind of jump Jakob takes, because everybody was expecting Jakob to take the big jump this year, and he really didn't. And Hronsky, I think, just had the better season.
He didn't because his 3-point shot needs work. He's got the mechanics down and doing all the right things. But his 3-point. I mean, what's his 3-point percentage, guys? Do we know?
I mean, it's
like 25% or something.
Well, now that we have cumulative season stats, we can kind of look at that now. So, now that the season stats are in for the end of the season, the Dukes as a team shot 34.1% from 3. Obviously not terrible. The best percentage was Cam Crawford at 43.1. Dinkins attempted the most and made the most. He was 77 for 203 for 37.9%. Hronsky 36 for 102 at 353. Rozier and Edwards both made 35. Rozier shot 31.5, Edwards 31.0, and Netchis was only a 24.7% 3-point shooter. He only attempted 73, so he made 18.
Yeah, he should take more, but that's the whole point. Yeah. I mean, he should take more. He's open in some of those. I understand that he's the glue. He is the facilitator along with Rozier, but he is the glue in the middle of that top of the key kind of passing when he gets it, and or off to the side a little bit in the 3-point land, and he's getting those, and he passes it to somebody. He thinks that that's the best move, but the point being is that, dude, you got to take an open shot if you have it there, but because you're not making them, you're making 24%. I mean, dude, you got to improve that. This summer, he's got to be at the 3-point. He's got to be fed throughout. Let him develop the in game later on, but that 3-point percentage has got to go up.
Mike, did you finish your 5? Who would you put at center?
Oh, I would put Eli at center, but just to go off of what Rudy was saying, one of the most like obvious parts of the Duke season was that it just seems like everybody hated to shoot. It would just be at your bet out of games and just be pass until
Right.
But then everybody except Dinkins, because Dinkins was very trigger happy. But yeah, I would put Eli at center, and then my 4 would be the Giannis type forward that I would hope that we bring in over the summer. Because I think,
Another unicorn.
yeah.
Mm.
Again, he doesn't have to be Giannis. He doesn't have to be nearly as good as Giannis. I'm just saying you need a player like that.
Yeah. We'll settle for like Jokic.
LeBron's never played in college. I'm just throwing it out there.
Right. Who knows what the rules now? So I'm with all you guys. I guess the undecided parts, I guess we're kind of torn on. So obviously I want DeMichael in there as well, in my starting 5 somehow. And then I would also keep Cam Crawford in there. I'm leaning toward Rozier though as my 1, only because he'll be a senior and he is a glue guy and he is another coach on the floor. But he is only 5'9", and we don't draw a lot of free throws. If he's not going to drive into the paint, maybe a 6'5", or a guy 6'2", or somewhere along that way, being the point man might be the way to go. But coming into camp, I'm going with my experienced guys as my starters. I'm going with Dixon at center, and I'm going with Rozier at the point. But as game situations dictate, with Dixon being more of a defensive specialist, I love Eli Wilborn's bully ball in the paint. So he probably, I would be easily talked out of these things. But I do want Netchus and Crawford and DeMichael on the floor. Well, guess we'll wait and see, guys. We're in a holding pattern there. Corbett is gone, right? So Corbett is out of eligibility. I was disappointed, in his preseason, or I should say non-conference portion of the schedule. He looked great. He was our best player for a while there. But as he'll be a one and done Duke, unfortunately, he's used his eligibility up. So heading into the off season, guys, there's a little bit of uncertainty surrounding the department, in so much as the person who hired the athletic director is leaving at the end of 25-26, which is Ken Gormley. So news recently broke that Duquesne president Ken Gormley will resign his position as university president at the end of the 25-26 school year. So, that's leadership at the very top. That's above athletics. And then athletics, of course, is the person who hired Drew Joyce. I don't think this is going to be anything earth-shattering within athletics, but you always kind of wonder when a new president comes in, what direction they're going to take with resources to athletics, if they're going to have the vision Ken Gormley did. And it always just worries me a little bit, being the Duquesne sports historian that I am, when I see leadership shake up, and the guy who basically, I think Ken Gormley he might be most to thank, right, for the success of the basketball team in recent years, because his focus on athletics and reinvigorating the brand of Duquesne basketball is what led to Dave Harper, which led to Keith Danbrook, led to the Field House, which led to the A-10 championship and the NCAA tournament win. None of that happens without Ken Gormley. So it's obviously disruptive, and it does present a question mark. I'm curious about where you guys think that might shake out in terms of how that could cascade into the athletics department. And I'll go to Rudy. You've been a Duquesne fan longer than us, so leadership of the university has changed a lot since you've been a Duquesne student and fan. Does this worry you at all?
Well, it shouldn't worry me. I just that they should find a good successor that has the same type of philosophy towards sports. That's what they need. But I fully expect that they're going to do that because it's been an unqualified success that that his attention to bringing sports leadership as being the president uh, was directly reflected last year. So yeah, I just think that they're gonna go down the same road uh, and hire somebody that is I don't know, sports friendly, okay, which was counter to what we had before Gromley, okay. These guys that were presidents before were not committed to sports and particularly to the basketball program. And a perfect testament of that was when the first message ever left on the Duquesne message board, privy to me, was the fish rots from the top. And that was back in 1993. Okay. And it took 6 months for anybody to answer that. That's how far back I go. Okay. This is so, and that was talking about the GM at the time and the president being critical. If you don't invest, if you don't care about the athletics, the thing's going to die on the vine. And that's what we got for many years. Thank God Cromley came around. Thank you.
Yeah. So no. I think you speak for a lot of Duquesne fans when you're appreciative of Dr. Gormley's contributions and also critical of his predecessors, because that was a big knock. This is a cheap plug for work I've done on this. I've written chapters for the Unlucky 21 book and the 47 Years book and the Kings on the Bluff books, and I've essentially reused a lot of the same copy, detailing the history of Duquesne athletics, and particular men's basketball, since the 50s, and it was a slow, steady decline until Ken Gormley. So I'm certainly appreciative of Dr. Gormley as a Duquesne sports fan and just as a Duquesne person, because I know how important branding is in athletics. For better or for worse, can carry the flag for your university. He will stay as a chancellor, so that can be an actual executive position, or it can be ceremonial.
Right.
Knowing that he'll be a chancellor, but there'll still be a president, seems to be a more ceremonial position, which I have no problem with, because that keeps his presence here. He's been proven to be a very successful fundraiser. According to the university, he brought in $335 million over the course of a decade in fundraising. Started the College of Medicine. Dr. Gormley's success extends beyond basketball and athletics, and so
Right.
I'm glad that he's sticking around. Mike, you're on campus with me. You're a current student. You'll be there for a few more years. What was your reaction to that news about Ken Gormley?
I'm surprised. He doesn't seem, I don't know how old he is.
He'll be 70 on Wednesday when this
Okay.
episode drops a couple days before that.
I was also surprised by that fact. He does not seem like he's 70 years old.
No, he doesn't. He seems a lot younger, but he has, I wasn't really thinking about like the implications of what you just mentioned. I mean, when you see something like that in the moment, you're just like, oh, wow. And then we got to cover this next week. But um, yeah, I think when you make a change like that, you always got to be a little bit worried. You never know what the next person is going to do. At least they're not going to be able to move the team. This is college. But yeah, it was definitely surprising for me.
He's certainly someone that likes the camera. He likes the microphone, and he's very
Yeah.
good at it. I mean, his record with how well he is, how good he is as a writer, and how well he performs in front of the camera in terms of selling Duquesne. So I love that he's sticking around. Um, Nick, early thoughts on Gormley on this
Yeah.
news?
So I got to experience what life was like before Gormley, and then I was able to experience the start of the Gormley era as a student, and it was night and day. Just from student involvement and actually being present.
Right.
Nobody really knew the president before President Doherty
Yep.
on a personal level. Father Hogan seemed like the kind of face of Duquesne during that time period. And then there's a VP of Student Life, uh, which was Father Hogan. So he kind of seemed like And then Gormley came in and just had everybody. It was a much more optimistic view, it seemed like, whenever he stepped in. He was definitely very dedicated in fundraising for athletics and for the school at large. He made sure to make Duquesne a more national presence, and it worked. I mean, we made the NCAA tournament, and we had a video go viral about how to pronounce Duquesne for all the people out there. Um, he was a great president. Really going to miss him. Glad he's sticking around as chancellor. Seems like part of that role is kind of transitioning the new president,
Right.
and hopefully he can teach him all the best practices that he picked up. Because part of the reason I went to law school at Duquesne was at the time Gormley was the dean of the law school, and then in my first year there is when he transferred from dean of the law school to president of the university. So he was a very charismatic guy. Um, Great leader. Hopefully we can get another good one. I am a little worried for the same reasons. I mean, if we don't have a priority of keeping the same priorities in order, we might fall back again with athletics, which has been going well for a long period of time. It's been going up and up, and I hope that we can keep that trajectory.
Well, consider, guys, the resources that are required now to compete successfully in Division I sports, in particular these revenue sports like men's basketball, right? I mean, okay, so when Gormley took over as president, but a lot of folks don't know this, but before Gormley was president, the athletics department ran through student life, and that was why Father Hogan had such an active role. But in Gormley's presidency, the way it runs now is athletics reports directly to Dr. Gormley, and so you wonder I mean, this place is run by a board, but it's obviously also run by the spirit and priests. And for years and years and years, the focus of men's basketball at Duquesne, you could argue, may have taken away from the focus of Duquesne as this spirit and institution of higher education. And there's no right or wrong answer as to which one you want to be known as, but obviously, if you ask the spirit and priest, they'd probably say, we want people to understand our mission as serving God through serving students. So you hope that, as a sports fan, I'm saying it's just as a sports fan, taking off my university professor hat for a second, as a sports fan, my hope is that the spirit and priests understand that order of priests understand that the best you can get your message to more people if you market properly, which I think is exactly what Dr. Gormley did with the athletics department as a marketing tool. But given the amount of resources now that need to be invested into athletics to ensure success, look at the money that's come into Davidson from Steph Curry. Look at the money, the attention that St. Bonaventure is going to get with why am I blanking on his name, who retired from ESPN? Woj. Yeah. So I mean, there's a huge commitment now, given NIL money and the transfer portal and trying to keep players here. I hope that the priests at Duquesne understand the value of this the way Ken Gormley was able to sell them on it. And I wasn't in those meetings when he was hired. I don't know if that was Dr. Gormley selling them or him, to carrying out their vision. So that just remains to be seen. I'm looking forward to how the Duke covers it Thursday. So they're going to cover that news and stay on it, I'm sure. But it's DuquesneDuke.org. That's where O Grady joins us from. Again, he's our guest, sports editor of the Duquesne Duke. Guys, we could talk about this longer, I'm sure. We could talk about men's basketball even longer, but there are some other athletics still happening at Duquesne, including the possibility that the women's basketball team may end up in a postseason tournament, and a pretty good one in the WNIT. The bracket for the WNIT will be announced after the bracket, of course, gets announced for the NCAA tournament. So selection night will be tonight, Sunday, March 16th, as we're recording. And then the matchups, the locations, the tip-off times, that news will come on Monday, March 17th. So if Duquesne makes the WNIT, we will certainly continue to cover that. And we'll be with you about that on All Duke Sports Talk. We want to stick with that team till the end. That team had, they won one game, did women's basketball in the Atlantic 10 tournament, and then lost a tough one on what we all kind of agree, I think, was a bad non-call on a Keandra Brown three-pointer that knocked him out of the A10 tournament. But the Dukes ladies have a chance to keep their season going. We can maybe get more Megan McConnell, which we're not going to complain about. So stay tuned for that news. Again, tonight we're recording March 16th. We'll find out if the Duquesne ladies will continue to have a season. Mike, you haven't been on yet, so I want to get your view on the women's basketball season as a whole. How you think those ladies acquitted themselves with a ton of turnover and really just being, again, the only all-conference performer any of the all-conference teams was for any Duquesne basketball team this season, by the way, was Megan McConnell. So I'm curious, Mike, how you think they met expectations this year.
I think they went almost exactly as you thought it would go. For the men, you were kind of like, okay, they were defending champions last year. This year, you don't know if they're going to win 20 games again, but certainly you didn't think they were going to win only 13. The women was kind of like, okay, they got all these new faces and Meg. And so, yeah, it went about as expected. I thought, I mean, they were really hot back in December, and then I was there for the Richmond UMass games at home, and they got beat up by both of those teams, and that was two games where it was like, okay, something might be wrong here. You don't know if this, I don't know what happened here, but I've never seen a Dan Bird coach team like play like this. And then, but they rebounded well from that. They won 3 out of 5 at the end. Overall, I'd say decently successful season. They really played Richmond well in the A10 game, which I think they could be proud of. I don't know if I would put them in the WNIT though.
Yeah, they're going to be close. I also don't think they should make it looking at their resume, as much as I hope I'm wrong. Um, what about you, Nick? How do you like their chances?
So I know Coach Burt's very optimistic that they'll get the invite. I know there's a lot of teams that don't accept the invite to the NIT, so I think that's part of the reason for the optimism is just there's going to be programs that just choose not to go through with it. And with Meg, we're in a unique situation where we're probably going to accept any postseason bid that we can just to get her at least one more game. Last year, the WNIT, we got to host the first round, and that was a really special game. So I think the ideal situation would be that hopefully we fall into that situation again. I don't know how likely it'll be, but if that does happen, that'll be a very exciting game to go see. So we'll see.
Jim Duzick, the head SID, his daughter and mine were both in the same middle school musical that wrapped up last night, and because we're in the same district, and I see Jim a lot, and he does not think that we have a chance to host. But he is like Dan Burt, optimistic. He actually does think we'll get the bid. So those guys know more than I do right now. So we will see. I'm looking forward to seeing Megan play some more. Mike, I think you agree with Rudy and Nick and I that Megan kind of, although I don't want to put words in your mouth, was robbed of that Player of the Year award. What do you think?
For sure.
I mean, she was better in every category, and she was the only standout really on the team, so she pretty much carried them. There's some national watch list she's on that the A10 Player of the Year is not. And so I was just really disappointed for Megan. Do you think she has a shot at the WNBA, Mike?
I think she does because Dan Burt thinks she does, and Dan Burt knows a lot more about women's basketball than I do. So I'll take his word for it. I know there's only 12 WNBA teams, maybe 13 next year, but I'm
I
sure.
think it's something like only like 36 ladies get drafted or something like that. So it's tough.
I don't know how many roster spots there are. I'm sure Megan McConnell is good enough to have a WNBA roster spot because she's by far the best women's player I've ever seen in person. I don't see how you could leave her out of the best women's professional league in the world.
And just to confirm, it is 12 teams deep, like you said, and there's only 3 rounds. And basketball's tough. The rosters aren't big. It's not like baseball with a deep farm system. It's not like hockey with a farm system or football with a giant roster. So basketball is a very hard sport to get drafted to the highest level. But I'm with you, Mike. She's the best player I've seen in person as well, because I haven't been to any WNBA games in person. But what I've seen out of Megan McConnell, and I've seen her play other great players who have visited, Duquesne. I have not seen anybody on the court yet in her career on the court with her at the same time who's been better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to unless anybody else had I'm sorry, I did want to ask one more question and about women's basketball because we might not get a chance to cover another game. This team had very limited turnover because not like last year they lost a ton of scorers. So Megan obviously is gone. Gabby Hutcherson's going to be gone. And we know Caitlin Ammons, who was injured, she's not going to return. So she's gone. Keandra Brown, confirmed by Coach Burt, she is also gone. I guess more turnover than I originally thought, but not like where they lost all those 1,000-point scores from a year ago. So I do see some good optimism for next season. A lot of returning players. We haven't seen a lot of Kelly McConnell yet, but the expectations of McConnell, are always so high. So I hope that's correct, and I hope it's a lot to live up to, of course. But curious to see what she brings. I really liked Nadia Moore, who is a freshman. Angela Matic comes back as a senior next year. Mackenzie Blackford, whom I also thought should have had a spot on the all-rookie team. She'll be a sophomore next year. Gabby Granton-Medley will be a junior, and this is all assuming there's not turnover, right? Faith Walker will be a sophomore. Journey Kiyaku will be a senior. She'll be basically like their leader next year. So I'm really optimistic about the Duquesne ladies, and I'm such a Coach Burt fan. Rudy, haven't heard from you about the women's team yet. Are you feeling as optimistic as I am about their future?
Well, more Megan, first of all, and second of all, yeah, uh, I I like Kiyako a lot. I wish she was a junior
Yeah.
next year. We could have her a couple more years, or another year. Uh, yeah, uh, I like I like the we had pretty decent depth. I mean, we ran at the beginning of the season, and that what was it, the joy in which we were playing defense and so on and so forth.
Relentless joy.
Yes,
Yeah, that was
relentless joy,
the
and
mantra.
I think we can keep that up. Uh, it's going to be tough to fill a McConnell shoes, but it's a team effort now. And yeah, I'm very optimistic about the women next year, as I am the men, by the way. Maybe I've been too negative, obviously, but yeah.
Yes, I'm optimistic about both. I truly am. Nick, do you have a rough starting five for next year coming in, just based on how the roster looks right now?
Yeah, so I know they're very high on the incoming freshman, Alexis Bortis. So Alexis might be the point next year. It's between her and Mackenzie, I would say at point. Journey's probably going to be at her two spot that she's been playing at. And then at the bigs, it's a little tough. I think Faith Walker might have earned a starting role. We'll see if there's any transfers. Raina Green, I know, played a lot of key minutes at the four, so she might get the starting role at the four. I know Rami Queta was another one who played like a 3/4, as well as Fatou Sane. So it's probably going to be similar to this year, with maybe a little less in the rotation, but it's probably still going to be like a 10-person deep contributions every night. As far as starters go, I can tell you that the two returning guards are pretty much set in stone, and then out of the forwards, I don't know. We'll see how they progress in the offseason to see who earns that spot. But I mean, Coach Burt likes tinkering at the start of the season too, to find out who's the right fit.
Alexis Bortis is a two-time West Virginia State Player of the Year. She's a 5'8" guard, which is great size for a guard. So yeah, highly acclaimed prospect.
Likely going to be 3-time after this season.
Well, good point. Yeah. So yeah, a terrific player from Wheeling Park, West Virginia. She's very close. She's basically native, right? So that's pretty cool, because you like to keep your locals. Wheeling, West Virginia is essentially a Pittsburgh suburb. So that's pretty cool. So Alexis Bortis, you see it's a lot different in the ladies game, of course, right? Where women and female athletes can come in at a young age and contribute right away, whereas sometimes male athletes coming out of high school are still boys, not yet men. And so that's encouraging. I think that you can definitely start all 4 years, like the way Megan McConnell did. So it's a good point. I hadn't even thought about Bortis. But I like I'm going to go with the exact same thing you said, Nick. I have no other changes. I do think that they need a big, with Keandra leaving and Caitlin being hurt. I mean, when they were outsized by, what was it? Back-to-back games you mentioned, Richmond and
UMass, and Burt called it, I think, the 6 most embarrassing quarters of his career or something.
Yeah.
It was something bad.
Yeah, he was correct.
Pretty spot on.
Yeah, he was correct.
Really bad.
I was at both games. I was just could not believe how bad they looked. I actually brought my basketball team to play at halftime, and it was the most exciting part of the
That's
night.
right.
It was
Right.
just, but yeah, I'm with Nick on his the roster for next year. But I'd love to see a big. So we'll see how that goes. Mike, any other last thoughts on women's basketball?
No, I agree. I think you need to start all three of Blackford, Moore, and Walker. I think all three of them had really promising seasons as freshmen. Uh, Angela Maddich seems like the perfect sixth woman for this group coming off the bench. They need a big, and then I think Journey by default is your point guard. So yeah, that's my starting five.
Yeah, she might get that nod coming into camp, and then we'll see what happens with Bordas. I want to reiterate the Duquesne football spring schedule. So this year, I'm told by the SID office, Jacob Davey is the contact for Duquesne football. He tells me that the spring game this year will look a little more like a traditional spring game. So if you can get down to go over to Rooney Field for that, you can park in the Forbes garage and make your way over to it. It should be kind of cool. That's going to be April 5th is the spring game, and that's again time to be determined. But that will be an actual, as much as they can, spring game, like a red and blue game. So that'd be kind of cool. The Dukes are in the middle of spring football practice. It'll go till April 2nd and then conclude with that April 5th spring game. I was going to talk to our guest, Josh Taylor from KDK, was supposed to join us this week. But Josh felt under the weather. So get well to Josh. Josh was a buddy of mine. We went to journalism school at Duquesne together, and he was a mascot when I was a football player on the year we won a national title. So good buddy of mine. So get well to Josh. And thank you again to Mike for stepping up on short notice in his shoes. But that's all for our football news. I want to mention there's a number of Olympic sports at Duquesne currently underway that we don't always get a chance to talk about. But just in case we can't record another show this season and we take a hiatus, during the summer months, men's women's track and field begins their outdoor seasons on March 21st. The men are now varsity for the outdoor season. Their indoor season is a club team. It's basically a Title IX way of handling things. But the men and women will open up their outdoor seasons March 21st and 22nd at the 49er Classic in Charlotte. And it's a shame that there's no meets happening in Pittsburgh right now. Usually, when you host meets in Pittsburgh this time of year, it's terrible track weather. But the Dukes will compete in Pittsburgh March 29th, and hopefully the weather continues. That's going to be at the CMU Invitational in Oakland at the CMU's Gessling Stadium. So if you want to see the Dukes in person, CMU Invitational March 29th. I want to talk about the acrobatics and tumbling team again. That team has gotten a lot of attention because they've competed against some big programs and done pretty well. The Dukes posted a season high performance against number 1 in the country, Baylor, for the Acrobatics and Tumbling Coaches Association rankings. And that meet at the Cooper Fieldhouse was won by Baylor 275.030 to 256.210. But that 256 was a season high for acrobatics and tumbling. They actually won a number of the events against the best acrobatics and tumbling team in the country. So considering that acrobatics and tumbling is a new sport and it's almost all freshmen, that's pretty cool. They also competed against number 14 LIU earlier today, March 16th, and lost that as well. So they're on a bit of a losing streak. But I know, Mike, you were at the opener against Gannon, if I'm not mistaken. Did you cover that, or did a different reporter cover that one?
I ended up having to cover it for reasons we don't have to get into, but
That was pretty cool.
yeah, it was really cool actually. I didn't know anything about the sport beforehand. I didn't even know it existed. And just to see, you mentioned in class one day that like it blew away the support that we've had at any basketball game this season, and so that was a huge part of it too. The crowd was great. And I'm going to write an article. This is a side note. I'm going to write an article about the lack of student support at basketball games this year. I'm going to figure out why we had like no fans, since that bothered me.
Whoa, thank God.
Preaching to the choir, Mike.
Good for you, Mike. I'm looking forward to your column.
Thank God.
I was like struggling with whether or not I should write a letter to the editor on that. I was so frustrated by the lack of support given what the university has done to show the student body that they care about athletics, and it has not been reciprocated. So I'm looking forward to your column. It's cool. DuquesneDuke.org, or if you're on campus, you can pick up a hard copy. So very cool. Acrobatics and tumbling finishes its regular season April 6th, again at home against Buffalo State College. That's an unranked team. Buffalo State College, April 6th, 3 p.m. is the start of that meet at Cooper Fieldhouse. And then the acrobatics and tumbling season ends at the national championships April 24th through April 27th. The bowling team is conducting its season. It's coming toward the end of its campaign because it is a winter sport, technically, NCAA championship sport, nevertheless. Bowling will compete at the NEC championship March 21st through the 23rd. So that is their conference championship. Duquesne plays NEC bowling and football. So the NEC championship is March 21st to the 23rd. You can go to goduquesne.com to see all these results. Shout out to the SID folks, Trey Staunch, Jacob Davey, and Jim Duzick, and how much info they provide to have a show like ours go off well. Women's golf has had a very outstanding performer so far this season. There's a freshman named Sasha Petrachko. I haven't met Sasha. I know a lot of these student athletes. I do have some in class. I haven't met Sasha, but she's a 4-time Atlantic 10 golfer of the week, this rookie golfer of the week this year. So she's having quite an inaugural campaign. She has been the leader of the women's golf team. The Dukes finished 5th at a tournament in Florida back in earlier this month in March. The women's golf team continues its season. Eventually will conclude at the Atlantic 10 championships. So those are coming up. But Petrachko seems to be their best golfer. Those Atlantic 10 championships, by the way, will be April 17th through the 19th. So we'll keep an eye on Petrachko and see if she garners any kind of individual honors for women's golf at Duquesne. Moving on from there, Duquesne women's lacrosse. Mike, I want to come to you on this because this is a home spectator sport. They play at Rooney Field. I don't know if you've gotten to any of these matches yet for women's lacrosse, but they seem to be off to a relatively hot start. Are the Lax ladies at Duquesne? So they're now 5-3 overall. They lost their most recent match yesterday, 19-7 at UMass. But before that, they had won their 2 Atlantic 10 matches, and it's been a while since there's been good sustainable lacrosse success at Duquesne. I wonder, have you covered them yet this year?
No, I haven't. I didn't even know they started conference play, but I'm not surprised that they lost to UMass. I know Massachusetts is like the lacrosse capital of the US, but I think in their first game, I put in the rankings, the preseason rankings in the newspaper, and we were like 7th or 8th. So I'd be really happy if they outperform that, give us a nice team to watch in the spring on campus, obviously. But yeah, I got to go to one of those. I haven't yet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always fun to have more teams on campus to root for, and they do play right there on Rooney Field. Obviously, part of the reason acrobatics and tumbling is getting the attention it's gotten is because they play at the Cooper Fieldhouse. So it's the facility matters a lot. The next game for women's lacrosse is March 22nd against VCU at Rooney Field, by the way, and that opening draw is at 1 p.m. And I want to move on to women's rowing and give them some love. So women's rowing will compete in the Atlantic 10 championships on May 17th. That's a spring sport. They finished up their fall portion a while ago, but their spring portion begins March 22nd at Cornell up in Ithaca, New York. So good luck to women's rowing as it begins its spring season of the 25-26 season overall, 24-25, excuse me, overall academic year competition for them. So again, spring season begins for the women's rowers March 22nd at Cornell. The A10 championships will be May 17th in Pennsauken, New Jersey. And swimming and diving, we got to give them some love. Coach Sheets was our guest last week. I beg your pardon. I think earlier I mentioned it was Spencer Thomas. That was 2 weeks ago. Coach Dave Sheets joined us last week and gave us kind of a preview of the National Invitational Championships that Duquesne just wrapped up. The Duquesne Dukes women's swimming program competed March 13th through the 15th at the Florida Aquatic Swimming and Training Center in Ocala, Florida. The Dukes had a decent showing at the Invitational Championships. The way Coach Sheets described it is basically it's kind of like the NIT for swimming. So the ladies sent several Dukes down there. Freshman Rachel Howard had a personal best in the 200-yard butterfly. She got her time down to 2:05.86, which was she entered at 2:12.14. So shaved a lot of time off. Senior Haley Scholler finished 4th in the 200 back. That she's a back-to-back Atlantic 10 champion. Freshman Sierra Snow also competed in that event. She finished 9th. Junior Sydney Severini, she was in the 200 breaststroke. She finished 4th. And then the 400 freestyle relay finished 24th out of 35. And one more, freshman Jess Burns. She was in the 200-yard breast, and she ended up with a 2:14:20 time. And the earlier freshman Caitlin Connors earlier mentioned in 100 freestyle at 52.25. So this concludes the women's swimming and diving season. Coach Sheets, congratulations on all their success this year and what ended up being a fine season. And I want to finish by going around the table around this round table one more time, and go to you guys for your end of season thoughts on men's basketball, and assuming women's basketball was also wrapped up, we'll finish with those two big ones. I'll start, guys. As we mentioned a bunch, I'm very optimistic about men's basketball. I'm also optimistic about women's basketball. The only reason I'm a little higher on the men right now, despite the obvious difference in records they had this year, is that the women aren't graduating a bunch of points like they did last year, but Megan McConnell is gone, and she was so much to that team. So that's just such big shoes to fill. But with the men's team, we have a lot of returning players and a ton of depth. And I think year 2 under Drew Joyce is going to look a lot different. I think they're not going to have as much trouble closing out games. I heard the color commentator on the men's basketball broadcast on I guess it was USA Network, and I forget his name, but he mentioned something very interesting during the Duquesne game, and that was that the Dukes have a lot of talent. And he said almost too much talent. And what he meant by that was it's hard to figure out what your role is. And he harkened back to the 23-24 season where the Dukes had a tough going figuring out who had what role. And this year's Dukes were even deeper, not relying on any stars. They had almost too much talent, meaning too many guys with talent that you try to keep on the floor and give minutes to. And I think it didn't allow everybody to figure out their role. And I think by next year they'll have that figured out. At least that's my hope, and I would bet they do. I'm expecting a decent showing next year, and I'll even go out on a limb and say I think the Dukes are a double bye team for next year, because as what their record looked like this year, I know on paper it seems that's a big leap to make from the number 9 seed to a top 4, but there was a lot of parity in the middle of the A10. They were 2 or 3 games out from being a double bye team, and I just think next year they're going to close out games better. They're a year older, a year wiser, and no more so than Drew Joyce. I want to go to our guest, Mike O'Grady, give him a chance to, double down on what I've said or give a different take. Mike, your thoughts on the hoops programs as we possibly wrap up All Duke Sports Talk.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that you need to give new coaches a long leash. Joyce, I thought, had a fine rookie season, but I mean, you're going to see a lot of complaining on social media after games just about like, oh, he can't coach his team, like he doesn't know what he's doing out there. And I mean, that's not fair to do with any coach, especially not a college basketball coach. The only coach I've ever seen that I knew was going to be terrible from day one is Adam Gase. I knew as soon as the Jets hired him, he was going to, but that's besides the point. I think Joyce will be better next season. I think his team will be better next season. And the women, I think they're in good hands as long as they have Coach Burt.
Rudy and then Nick.
Well, dude, I'm optimistic, particularly about the men's team. We have a lot of guys, and you're right. I mean, the depth is a very negligible, uneasy kind of thing to handle. We had across the board depth, and like you said, in crunch time, maybe we had too many people to choose from. And the ones that were selected at the time did not perform up to snuff. I don't think we're ever going to start 0-6 again. Drew, is not going to be burdened with that. And, as I stated before, I've yet to see a rookie coach coming from another program, just being acclimated and getting himself acclimated to A10 play, and that he is now the major leader. He is the guy leading us into battle. Then, he's going to be, unfairly or fairly criticized if we fail. And I think we give him a mulligan this year, and I think he earned it, because he did fight back from that 0-6 start. And we were in there at with a winning record, be it one, in the conference. So, I look forward to what next year has to offer as far as the men are concerned, and I'm highly optimistic. And I think this is just the beginning of the Drew era, and that he's going to prove the university right, that they made the right thing to hire him. As far as the women's team is concerned, uh, I think it's going to be hard to replace Megan. Basically an All-American, and so, but Dan has proven that he is a good recruiter, and he's just going to have to work his magic this year.
Nick, Duquesne Duke started out 0-6 overall. On January 18th, they crawled all the way back to 9-9 overall and 4-1 in the Atlantic 10, and we were thinking happy thoughts. And then the Dukes lost 5 in a row. But at the end of the season, it did look possible, that they were showing flashes, and we were super optimistic. Are you just as optimistic heading into next season?
Yeah, I think a full season of developing this team under Drew, now that they've gotten the experience of this year, I think it's only onwards and upwards. Very the talent or the depth situation kind of you can argue both ways, and it seems like it's kind of in hindsight where you'll say, that was the issue, there's too many undefined roles, but if they win, it's, oh, look at how much talent they had, of course they're going to win. So the players and the coaches know what they need to work on. I'm sure they've already given them the off-season plans as to what each player should work on to get better next year and possibly for their professional careers down the line. Very optimistic about what this team is going to do next year. I do think we're going to have a winning record going into conference play as opposed to this year. Also wanted to shout out Arness Lawson is the other incoming freshman guard, who is 6'2" and out of Ohio. So that's my take on the men's basketball side of things. Women's basketball, always will have full faith in Coach Burt to get the team ready. I do think there's a lot of talent there that is returning, even with the key contributors leaving this year. And I think there's going to be a lot of great freshman talent from what Coach Burt told me. I know we haven't gotten official word about the commits of the bigs that are coming in, but looking forward to seeing them in action. And then my final thought outside of basketball related news is Tracy Coyne, who's the women's lacrosse coach, might be the equivalent of Dan Brott for men's basketball. I mean, looking through her resume, she was the winningest coach in St. Francis history. She coached at Notre Dame and was part of the, I think, Big East Coach of the Year in 2006 and 2008 for lacrosse. We got a steal here, and it's no wonder how the women's lacrosse team has started off so hot with that kind of coaching hire. I'm looking forward to seeing how our season this year and next year goes with women's lacrosse now that I've really dug into her resume.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, guys. Well, that'll wrap up at least this episode of All Duke Sports Talk. I'm going to talk to my cohorts here, Rudy and Nick, and decide what we're going to do for next week. But a lot of that will depend on how women's basketball finishes their season. They might not be done just yet. So stay tuned for that. As always, thank you for watching, listening. Mike O'Grady, really appreciate you hopping on in a pinch. DuquesneDuke.org. Looking forward to your column. Looking forward to the paper's coverage of the Ken Gormley news as well. So till next time, whatever that is, shoo, shoo, rah, rah, go Dukes.